Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into the world of Bitcoin. Um, but we're not just gonna, look at the typical like price charts and all that. We're going way deeper.
Deeper into the subconscious.
Yeah, we've got transcripts from 2 hypnosis sessions, and they're all about like Bitcoin, its origins, its purpose, even its future.
These sessions, they give us this really unique look into how people think and what they believe about Bitcoin,
Yeah.
going beyond like the technical stuff.
Okay, so both of these hypnosis sessions, totally separately, describe Bitcoin starting in a really similar way. They both say the idea for Bitcoin, it didn't come from like one person. It came from some kind of like energy field,
Yeah.
a collective energy. What do you think about that?
It is fascinating. If we entertain that idea for a second, it makes you wonder, like where do big ideas even come from, right? Like are they really from one person's mind, or are they somehow tapped into something bigger? It's definitely something to think about.
Yeah. And one section even mentions this guy Alex, maybe English, maybe with Swedish and German roots too. And he led this team of people developing all these complicated algorithms, and they were all about like using as little energy and time as possible. Sounds kind of familiar. Yeah.
Interesting. It's hard to know, how accurate any of this is coming from the subconscious like that. But, innovation, it often comes from a lot of different motivations. The same session also mentions these two guys, and they're talking about hiding money offshore. So maybe there was a less than perfect reason for creating Bitcoin as well. It wasn't all about like tech and innovation.
Okay, so we've got this like mystery energy field. We've got a team of uh, developers. We've got whispers of shady money stuff. So where does Satoshi Nakamoto fit in all of this? Everyone knows that name, right?
Right. Well, both sessions, they seem to agree that this guy, Satoshi Nakamoto, he might not have actually invented Bitcoin. He might be more like a figurehead, or even someone who bought the idea from someone else.
Oh, wow. So the face of Bitcoin, maybe not the brains behind it. And one session, it describes Satoshi as this serious Japanese man in a suit and maybe even connected to the Yakuza. And he was like putting pressure on this other important guy, Hal Finney.
No, that's an image.
It is. It is.
And speaking of Hal Finney, his story is it's really sad and interesting at the same time. He got the very first Bitcoin transaction ever, and when he died from ALS, he chose to be cryogenically frozen. And one session, it even describes him as a gray. That's what they call a certain extraterrestrial being.
Raise. Whoa. Okay. I mean, I've heard that term before, but is there anything outside of this hypnosis session that could make us think that's true?
Well, you got to be skeptical about these kinds of claims, for sure. The idea of aliens, specifically grays, it's usually connected to, conspiracy theories and stuff. But it's still interesting how these beliefs can affect how people see technology, how they see power.
Yeah, it's like, especially with something like Bitcoin that really challenges how things are. It's like we project all these hopes and fears onto it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is that both sessions, they describe Finney getting sicker with ALS because of a chip or implant. Like his health was connected to Bitcoin somehow. One session even says this implant made him smarter, but it ended up like exploiting him, leaving his essence trapped. And the grays are the ones controlling it all.
That is getting a little out there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's scary to think about, but we got to remember that these are just interpretations of someone's subconscious, right? Not necessarily facts.
You're right. It's important to remember that separate fact from fiction. But that's what makes it so interesting, right? That blend of the two.
Totally. So, okay, what about Bitcoin's real purpose?
Mhm.
Was it really made to create a different kind of financial system, or was there something darker behind it all?
Both sessions, they talk about this power struggle between, the people behind Bitcoin and the people in charge of like traditional money. And one session, it calls them the Draco-Reptilian energy.
Draco-reptilian energy. What exactly does that mean?
Well, it sounds strange, I know, but it seems to represent the old way of doing finance, the system, and how it doesn't want to change. This session describes these Draco-Reptilian forces as like furious, like they're losing control over the flow of money through those, offshore accounts and all that.
So Bitcoin is kind of like an attack on the establishment in
Yeah,
a way.
exactly. It's a decentralized system. It operates outside of governments and banks, and that's exciting, but also potentially disruptive. It's like David and Goliath, little guy going up against the giant.
And this fight, it makes us wonder, like, what's the future of money? One section says Bitcoin could cause everything to collapse.
Hmm.
because it's not backed by anything real, like gold.
But the other session, it sees a different future. Like Bitcoin and regular currencies will both exist. They'll serve different needs, maybe even different societies.
So two very different possibilities: collapse or working together. Which one feels right to you?
It's interesting to think about both of them. On one hand, there's this potential for chaos and change, and on the other, there's this potential for a more adaptable system, more diverse. But before we go too far down that road, both sessions talk about something else too. The power of symbols in the crypto world. They mention, the bee, the pyramid with the eye, even animal imagery. Like they're using these to influence people's minds, to shape their choices.
Interesting. It's like branding and marketing, right? Those little images, they can have a huge effect on what we decide. We
Yeah.
don't even realize it half the time.
Exactly. And with something like Bitcoin, something that could change so much, it's important to understand those influences.
For sure. Okay, well, we'll be right back to explore those different futures for Bitcoin. And we'll talk about what it all means for you. Stick with us.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about those symbols and how they connect to Bitcoin. It's pretty fascinating, this whole thing.
It is. Makes you wonder how much of what we think is valuable is just because of those little images and subconscious stuff.
Yeah.
But let's get back to those different futures we were talking about. One session said, Bitcoin could crash the whole system if it doesn't have something real backing it up, like gold. But the other session saw them working together, Bitcoin and regular money.
Right. That first one, the collapse scenario, it's what a lot of the skeptics are worried about. They say Bitcoin's not tied to anything, like gold. So its value it's all just speculation.
Yeah.
And that makes it, go up and down like crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that, right? The price is all over the place.
Exactly. And for some people that's a big problem. They think if everyone starts using Bitcoin, all that instability, it could mess up the whole financial system.
But the other session, it saw things differently, like Bitcoin and regular money coexisting. Can you talk a little more about that?
Sure. That scenario says that Bitcoin and the money we use now, they'll just evolve to serve different purposes. So maybe Bitcoin becomes like the main thing for online transactions and international transfers, or even like certain online communities. While regular money, it's still used for everyday stuff, paying
Yeah.
bills, buying groceries, government stuff.
That's interesting. It's almost like different species evolving in nature, each one finding its own niche.
That's a great way to put it. And this brings up a question for you, the listener. Which vision do you think is more likely? Do you see Bitcoin as a threat to the system? Or as something that could make the system more diverse and adaptable?
Yeah, something to think about. And speaking of the future, one session got into something pretty dark, like using Bitcoin to control people.
Yeah, that's the dystopian scenario. This session says that Bitcoin, or really the technology behind it, blockchain, it could be used to create a world without cash. And every transaction, everything you buy, everything you do is tracked by the government, by big corporations, whoever.
Like Big Brother watching everything you do. That doesn't sound very good.
Yeah, it definitely raises some concerns about privacy and freedom. Imagine not being able to even get a cup of coffee without someone knowing about it.
I don't even want to think about it. But I mean, is that really possible? Isn't Bitcoin designed to be like decentralized? Couldn't that protect it from that kind of control?
Well, that's a good point. Bitcoin is supposed to be, outside the control of any one group. But some people argue that as governments and big institutions, as they learn more about blockchain, they might find ways to control it, or at least track those transactions enough to really mess with privacy.
So it's not as clear cut as we might think. There's potential for good and bad, right? It really comes down to how we use this technology.
Exactly. And speaking of choices, let's talk about that guy Alex again. The one who might have led the development team.
Oh yeah, he was like a ghost, popped up and then vanished.
Ah.
What else did those sessions say about him?
Well, one session said Alex, he was really worried about the ethics of Bitcoin. He wasn't just focused on the tech, he was thinking about what it might do to the world, the consequences.
Makes sense. I mean, if you're building something that could change, like everything, you'd have to think about that, right? The good and the bad.
For sure. The session suggests Alex was troubled by the idea of Bitcoin being used for bad things, money
Oh,
laundering, funding terrorism, that kind of stuff.
so he saw that dark side, the potential for harm,
Hmm.
right alongside the good. Kind of like those stories, where the scientist creates something amazing, but then loses control of it.
Exactly. And this conflict, this struggle between the good and the bad, it seems like it really weighed on him.
It's a reminder that, even with the most innovative tech, even with Bitcoin, there are these ethical questions. We have to think about those.
Absolutely. Now, let's switch gears again. There's this other concept that came up, the idea of Bitcoin as a gateway to other dimensions.
Other dimensions. Wait, are we talking sci-fi
I
here?
know it sounds kind of out there, but one session it described how blockchain, the technology behind Bitcoin, it could be used to create like portals to other realms, other realities.
Okay, I'm listening. But how could something digital, how could that create like a portal to another dimension?
You gotta remember, these are just interpretations, not hard facts. But if we think about it, we're using more and more digital tech all the time, right? Maybe it's blurring the lines between the real world and the virtual world, and maybe blockchain with how it's all connected, it could be the key to opening up those new levels of reality.
That's a lot to take in. It's like Bitcoin isn't just changing money. It's changing how we understand reality itself.
That's the idea. And the session even says that some of the people who created Bitcoin, like Alex, like Hal Finney, maybe they knew about this. Maybe they were even guided by forces from those other dimensions.
Wow. Yeah, okay, we're definitely in the realm of speculation now.
Mm.
But it's interesting how these ideas, even if they're just symbolic, they change how we see Bitcoin, how we see what it could do.
For sure. And it's that mix, the tech, the philosophy, even the spiritual stuff. That's what makes Bitcoin so captivating.
No doubt. Okay, before we move on, let's just quickly go over what we've talked about.
Yeah.
We've looked at two possible futures for Bitcoin.
Hmm.
One where it all falls apart and one where it works alongside regular money. We talked about how blockchain could be used for control
Mm.
and even the idea of it being a gateway to other dimensions.
You got it. And in the last part of our deep dive, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty, how Bitcoin actually works, and we'll discuss what it all means for you.
Welcome back to the deep dive. So we've talked about some pretty wild stuff, right? Bitcoin's like mysterious beginnings, how it could change or even break the financial system, the ethics of it all. We even touched on the idea of other dimensions.
Yeah, we've definitely gone pretty deep into the philosophy and speculation of it all. But let's get back to the basics for a bit, the actual nuts and bolts of Bitcoin.
Okay, so tech talk. I think a lot of people, when they hear blockchain, cryptography, mining, their eyes just glaze over. Can you break it down for us? Like, how does this thing actually work?
Absolutely. So at its heart, Bitcoin, it's a digital currency, and it runs on this tech called blockchain. Imagine like a giant digital ledger. And this ledger, it tracks every single Bitcoin transaction, and it's not kept in one place. It's distributed across a whole network of computers all over the world.
So it's like a public record of every Bitcoin transaction constantly being updated and checked by this network.
Exactly. And that's where mining comes in. Miners, they're like the bookkeepers of Bitcoin. They use, really powerful computers to solve these complex math problems. And by doing that, they verify transactions and add new blocks of information to the blockchain.
So they're like digital accountants, making sure everything is accurate and safe.
That's a good way to put it. And for their work, they get rewarded with new Bitcoins. It's actually a competition, these miners. They race to solve those math problems and get those rewards. It's called proof of work. It's a big part of what makes Bitcoin secure, makes it really hard to mess with.
Okay, I get it. But I've heard that all this mining, it uses a ton of energy. Is that a problem?
Yeah, it does take a lot of energy. It's definitely something people are talking about, especially with climate change and all that. Some people say the environmental cost is just too high, it's not worth it. But others say, as we get better with renewable energy, the impact of mining will go down.
Yeah, it's complicated. It feels like any tech that can change things this much, there are gonna be some downsides.
That's true. Now, let's go back to something we talked about before, the idea of Bitcoin being like alive, sentient. One session said Bitcoin has a consciousness, a collective intelligence that comes from the network.
I gotta say, it's a fascinating idea, but also kind of creepy.
Mm.
and very speculative, right?
It is. There's no scientific proof that a digital currency can be conscious, but it does make you think, like, as we create these technologies, these really complex systems, is it possible that they could develop some kind of awareness?
It's like we're in uncharted territory, pushing the limits of what we thought was even possible. And it makes us think about ourselves, our place in the world and how we interact with the things we create.
Exactly. And whether you believe that Bitcoin is sentient or not, it's a powerful way to think about how much this tech could change things.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Bitcoin, what are the big things our listeners should remember?
First, remember that Bitcoin it's more than just, digital money. It's this complex, ever-changing tech with the potential to disrupt everything, not just finance, but our whole lives.
Yeah. And second, be curious about Bitcoin, but don't just believe everything you hear. Do your own research. Ask questions, come to your own conclusions.
That's important. And finally, remember, Bitcoin's future, it's still being written. It's up to all of us to be a part of these conversations, to think about the risks and the rewards, and to guide this technology in a way that helps humanity.
Well said. This deep dive, it's really just the beginning. There's so much more to explore and learn about Bitcoin, and we hope you'll keep digging deeper. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the heart of the digital revolution. Until next time.